right, our final agenda item this evening is the Castle Ridge Group Home Project Development Plan and FDP PDP 220013. I believe we have a conflict on the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am currently the president of the Foothills Gateway Foundation Board. This board owns 3 host homes serving adults with intellectual and physical disabilities. Because of this position, there may be a perception that I have a conflict of interest and that I would not be totally fair and unbiased in consideration of this item. Please note that I did not participate in the discussion of this item at the board's work session on December 9th, nor did I participate on this item when it appeared before the Planning and Zoning Commission on a previous occasion. So with that, I'll be recusing myself. And thank you, Jeff and Per, for serving on the board. I know this is your last meeting. So.
Thank you, Ted. As Ted is packing up, Shard, have we received any new information on this agenda item?
We have. We've received several emails, both in favor and in opposition to the project. These have been listed as attachment 9 for this item in the hearing packet. And then also I have handed out a photo that was given to us by Greg Lasarte. That has been listed in exhibits as being received during the hearing and will be updated on the document log and added to the site once we are wrapped up here.
Thank you, Shar. All right, we'll turn it over to Kai for a brief introduction.
Yeah, good evening, Chair Katz and members of the commission. My name's Kai Clear. I'm a city planner for the city of Fort Collins. Before you tonight, as you already know, Castle Ridge Group Home Project Development Plan. As part of the project, the applicant team submitted a reasonable accommodation request to grant relief from Land Use Code Standard 3.8A to allow for 10 residents, or relief from the standard that would typically limit the amount of residents for this type of project to 8. The city is required to provide the ability for applicants to request reasonable accommodation by the Fair Housing Act and the American with Disabilities Act. And the city adopted these resolutions in 2017. In the next slide, I'll go over the process and sort of our evaluation criteria and the relevance to your decision tonight. Since the time of the adopted regulations, 9 accommodations have been submitted and decided on by the Director of Community Development and Neighborhood Services, Paul Side. Not specifically by him, but he is a decision maker for this particular reasonable accommodation request. This is a process that's not open to public input. Only the applicant can appeal the decision, and the Planning and Zoning Commission cannot alter this decision as part of your decision tonight, or as part of your consideration of the project tonight. The applicant's reasonable accommodation was conditionally approved and was approved with the following 3 conditions. The proposal must be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is something that is already required by the residential low density zone district. That the project will be subject to the requirements of the low density residential zone district, and that the project may be subject to conditions of approval, including but not limited to requirements for parking, limitation of hours of drop-off and pickup, regulations of lighting intensity and hours of illumination, requirements related to trash and recycling, screening, storage, and fencing. And finally, the facility will implement measures. The last condition, the facility will be required to implement measures to mitigate impacts and retain the residential character, including the maintenance of the garage doors that you'll see in some of the later slides and elevations. No signage indicating that this is a group home, so no visible signage to the on the exterior, posted on the exterior of the building or in the yard, and no more than 2 staff working shifts on site at any given time. And there is an exception for emergencies and shift changes for this condition. As previously mentioned, the original proposal that the Planning and Zoning Commission heard on March 23rd in 2020 was a proposal for 16 residents and included 3 conditions. At the March hearing, the Commission denied the project and found that parking could not be adequately managed through the staff's recommended condition, which would have required employees to park down the street approximately 800 to 1,250 feet away, and also require active management of parking in the driveway and on the street. The location of the project is at 636 Castle Ridge Court. Oh, sorry. Yeah, yep. Katie. I do not have the conditions on a slide, so I can maybe put that together later. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That was the correct slide. So the project's located at 636 Castle Ridge Court. It's about a half-acre lot located in the residential zone district as mentioned. The project proposes a 10-resident group home for assisted living, the retention of 2 garage spaces for the use of employees, 4 parking spaces within the driveway, which includes 1 handicap accessible space, and then parking is proposed to be managed through a parking app that is meant for employees and visitor parking. And the applicant should have some more information on that in their presentation. The area was annexed to the city as part of this Keeneland annexation. The lot was later platted as part of an 18-lot subdivision in the Castle, named Castle Ridge at Miramont PUD in 1993. It wasn't until 2002 that this home was developed on the site. The site is served by a private street system, Castle Ridge Court, that connects into a public street system, the High Castle Drive. This is just a street view image of the property. A neighborhood meeting was held on July 28th this year. Comments and discussion included questions and concerns about the number of residents proposed in the group home and the parking impacts generated by the number of residents in a neighborhood that was already experiencing parking and movement issues on the street. Some of those comments related to the narrowness of the street and the ability for cars to pass each other bidirectionally. A general feeling by the community that this was not an appropriate land use within the neighborhood, and neighbors did not feel like they were being heard and that the use is being forced by the city. Concerns about procedural requirements being met for sign postings and neighborhood meetings, impacts to the privacy of neighboring properties related to window placement and outdoor activities, and concerns about administrative staff and speculation they'll be living in the residence long term. These are a high-level summary of the documents. In your packet is a more complete picture of notes from the neighborhood meeting and then additional comments that we've received since the neighborhood meeting and up till tonight. And that concludes our overview.
Thank you for that introduction, Kai. Who will be presenting on behalf of the applicant? So, Stephanie, do you think you can do it in 30 minutes or less?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Start whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate you spending your late night with us this evening so that we could have this hearing completed this week, so that hopefully we can all enjoy Christmas next week. My name is Stephanie Hansen. I work for CraftX Studio, and I am a land planner in the city of Fort Collins. So, just a brief overview of why we're here tonight. Zioma and Eric currently live in the home with their 2 grown daughters who also have vehicles and their young son, so a family of 5, along with 2 residents that currently legally live in the facility, in their home. And so there are a total of 7 people currently living in the house. The intent is that those 5, the family of 5, will be moving out once this is a residential home for seniors. So where we currently have 4 vehicles coming and going every day, those will be leaving when this home is opened. So the property is already accessible. It was owned by a woman who needed extra care moving around. I understand she had some sight issues. So as far as the perfect property in the city for this use, that's why this selection was chosen. And that's why this house makes a perfect fit for this use. So as you know, we started this process back in 2020 with the conceptual review, and at that time we had the reasonable accommodation approved for 16 residents. We did submit the PDP application and came before you in March. That was denied, as Kai mentioned, with those concerns. And so we went back to the drawing board and we had to review the threshold of how many residents with how many staff will still provide an excellent level of care and still reduce the number of residents. And so we were able to come up with the number of 10 with 2 staff members, which is still a 1-to-5 ratio, which is still higher than most of the memory care facilities that are in town. Once we determined that 10 would work, 11 won't, 9 won't, it was kind of a magic number, a threshold number. We went back and asked for a reasonable accommodation for those 10 beds, which was approved in May. We then had another neighborhood meeting, and we also went to the HOA board, and the HOA board did approve the 10-bed residential group home. So we then went and had another neighborhood meeting, as Kai mentioned, and gave a great review of, and then submitted our PDP FDP application, and then we're here back before you tonight. So obviously we've heard a lot of concerns. This is a change. This is a change to an existing neighborhood, and we understand that change is difficult and it's scary. So at the first neighborhood meeting, we heard that it was too big of an impact on the neighborhood, and we heard that the neighbors didn't want any parking on the street, and so the application we came before you with was only showing parking in the driveway and off street. We heard concerns about the privacy of the windows and potential for emergency vehicles coming in the neighborhood more often. So again, I just want to reiterate that the residents cannot have cars. They are memory care patients. They cannot drive. We, at that time, mandated that the employees park on public streets, but I'll show you our new revised plan that the employees are not walking from further away public streets. They are now parking on site. We did originally take away the garage doors. We brought that back when you saw it last. And then we offered to build a larger driveway on site, but the neighbors did not like that approach either, with paving more of the front yard. So we then came before you and heard a few more concerns specifically about the parking. And we also heard some information back from the neighbors saying that fewer residents would be acceptable, that it is a good use. No one was against necessarily the use, but that maybe it was too intense. And so that's when we took that information that we learned, and that's where we came up with that threshold of 10 residents instead of 16. So the housing model was re-envisioned for the number of 10 residents. Like I said, it still gives that good ratio of 1-to-5. And then we also kept the garage as is rather than converting it to bedrooms. So the garage is still functional, and the 2 staff members will be required to park in the garage for their shifts. And we found this parking app called Park-A-Lot that we are proposing to use, even though a parking app is certainly not required by the land use code, and certainly in our view is probably not warranted. However, we are willing to go above and beyond and require that all of our guests use this app. So we went back and had another neighborhood meeting, but then we kind of heard some conflicting information where it was still 10 was still too many, and that there still wasn't enough parking. Again, the privacy of windows, and even with the change from 16 residents down to 10, the total trips were too much, and again, the emergency vehicles. So to respond to those concerns, like I said, we bumped it down to 10. Like I said, there's currently a family of 5, so staff will park in the garage. So as I heard a concern that there may be a perception that traffic has already increased because of this use, but I would venture to say that it's because there's 4 adult drivers in this home currently. And so will there be traffic increasing, with this use? Absolutely. We're not saying that we're going to add 0 cars to this neighborhood. There will absolutely be a traffic increase, but it won't be as substantial as it would have been with 16 residents. So we've now dropped that to 10 to help with those traffic trips. What we also did was that the therapists, the nurse visits, the grocery shopping, those can only occur between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we're avoiding all of those trips. We're removing them from peak hour during peak hours morning, peak hours afternoon. We have the ability to tell all of those deliveries that they have to happen between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. off peak hours. So then by keeping the garage, we also reduced the number of windows on that north elevation. And as far as policing, who parks where on what street, the HOA covenants do that already, that we can't create a nuisance. So obviously we are going to completely comply with all of the HOA regulations that are currently in place. Like I mentioned, we have had 2 residents for the past year since last November, and we have had 0 emergency vehicle calls. So as far as neighbor outreach that we've done since then, we did hold the neighborhood meeting. We consulted with the HOA board that agreed to the 10 residents. We approached the neighbors on both sides of the home and offered to meet privately and give them a tour of the home to show them really what our intent was. And those invitations have yet to be accepted, but those invitations remain open. We're still more than willing to do that, but they did not agree to meet with us. And then we did get some correspondence from the city asking for another neighborhood meeting. And we were asking, okay, what solutions are going to be presented to us? Is there any information that we will learn? How can we best respond to your concerns? Unfortunately, we didn't really get that information back, and so that meeting didn't ever happen. But again, we reached out to the neighbors on both sides to ask if there was any way we could meet privately, and that was not accepted. So regarding the parking spaces, you can see that the 2 spaces in the garage, those will be for staff. We have 2 spaces directly behind those and an additional 2 all within the driveway for those short-term delivery spaces and visitors. And since there was a concern that on-street parking, we will utilize those 3 spaces of on-street parking very last. Those will not be utilized unless absolutely necessary. So there are a total of 6 parking spaces on site now that we can utilize for deliveries, staff, and visitors. And how we'll manage that. This is a Park-A-Lot app. Apparently it has 5 out of 5 stars, so somebody likes it and it's useful. But you go on your phone and you say, I'm going to park here at this time, and you just hit the button, and then that reserves your spot. So we are not by any means restricting any family members from coming and visiting their loved ones, but now they just have to say, okay, if all the spots are full, I'm going to have to wait an hour until someone leaves, and then I can come and park and visit my relatives. And there is screening at the driveway. You'll see the neighbor has an RV, and so I couldn't imagine that a couple cars in the driveway are more impactful. If RVs are temporarily allowed to be on site per HOA covenants, then I certainly would expect that some cars in a driveway would be less impactful than that, especially with the screening of the shrubs that we have along that driveway. So just to give you an idea of the street width, the top image is the Lucas standards, the Larimer County Urban Area Streetscape Standard street width, which shows that 30-foot roadway, and ours is simply 2 feet less. and it has the 14-foot travel lane instead of the 16-foot travel lane. There is similar parking on both sides, that 7-foot space. So if two-way traffic is completely possible on 16 feet, I don't understand why two-way traffic wouldn't be possible on 14 feet. However, we never anticipate our uses needing to park on both sides of the street as well as in our driveway. We have spoken with numerous of the other operators in town. We've spoken, because this isn't a new concept, we have these residential homes, several of them in town. We have spoken with them, and they very, very, very rarely have more than 5 cars at the absolute most, and then it just goes down from there. So we honestly do not believe, based on facts and figures of speaking to people who run these homes, that the parking will be a problem. However, like I said, we are willing to go above and beyond and do this parking app. This is an image of the street that was taken a little while ago, and you can see that there is parking on both sides of the street, but I will also tell you that none of these cars were coming to our home. They were all for its home across the street, or next door across the street. So this was a party that was held across the street. None of these people were coming to our residence. So does parking happen on both sides of the street existing today? Yes, it does. So we're not creating an issue that doesn't exist currently. We are bringing more people to the neighborhood. I understand that. But again, I believe that all of our residents, guests, will be able to park within the driveway and not on the street. The other changes we made were to that north elevation, where we removed the larger windows. So the top image is the existing home today. The bottom image is what we're currently proposing. And so it has the one window with the screening rather than the 3. And then it has that one higher up window. And even without that screen, this is the view that you have if you were to stand in that bedroom that we're proposing, looking out of the house. So we are going to be putting a screen in front of this landscape. We feel that it is sufficient for privacy for the neighbors. So I want to bring our attention to some of the other facilities that are around town, some of the other homes. If you look at these photos, this looks like a normal single-family home. This is exactly what we're trying to do. And with the reduced number of people down to 10 rather than 16, now we're comparing apples to apples to these other existing homes in town. This looks and feels, and this is our ideal. We do not want to stick out. We are not trying to build some mega multi-family development in an existing neighborhood. We want to be feel exactly how we are now. That's the whole point of a residential home, is we want these residents to feel like they are still in their own home. So this, for example, has one car parked outside of the building. You'll notice there aren't cars on both sides of the street. Granted, Google, this is a snapshot. The street view is probably taken a different time than the aerial, but absolutely, this is just a snapshot in time. An hour later, could there be more cars? Absolutely. But what I did is I went around to all of the different homes in town on Google, and not a single one of them had more than 2 cars parked at their facility. So there is a fear that this is bringing a lot of traffic, but that's just not what the facts and figures and existing homes show, even with talking to the operators of those homes. Here's another home called Live to Assist. You'll notice again, there's 1 car parked out front. There are 2 on the side. There's 1 in the street view, and then there's 2 on a different day up on the other street. So a maximum of 2 cars parked at this facility. Here's another one. Again, it just looks and feels like a single family home. That is our goal. We want to blend in. We do not want to stick out, and we want to mitigate any potential impact that we do have. And again, just 1 vehicle at this residence, and these have 8 to 10 residents living in these houses. You also didn't see any large dumpsters out front or cars blocking the street. And again, we want to We want to blend into the surrounding neighborhood. So just to reiterate, I mean, the whole idea of this is to be a home for these people, not an institution. So we want smaller homes with less people, less chaos, especially the memory care patients. We want them to feel like they are just in their own living room. And in summary, our project meets the land use code. We are not asking for any modifications. We are not asking for any alternative means and methods, no variances whatsoever. We are simply trying to provide a better quality of life for elderly people with disabilities. And we understand that this is a change to the neighborhood, but we are fully intending to work with our neighbors as much as possible to make sure that this is a smooth transition. From what we've heard from others, you know, there is that initial gut reaction where people are hesitant, but then once the home has been in place, then people understand that those fears are not warranted, and they can live cohesively together. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Kai, do you have a detailed analysis for us? Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Katz. Again, Kai Clear, City Planner, City of Fort Collins. Okay, great. Let me just. So this is an overhead view of the site, and I'll walk through some of the changes that are proposed as part of the group home, and sort of detail out why the changes are proposed, and what some of the reaction or the changes proposed and how they relate to some of the neighborhood comment and concerns that we've heard throughout the review of the project. So starting at the very top corner, you'll see sort of a red line that outlines the perimeter of the backyard. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing fence with a 6-foot wrought iron fence. I think that is a requirement for the type of occupants for this group home to provide a secure backyard for if they want to enjoy the backyard. Very to the left of that, on the north side of the building, Stephanie had covered this in her presentation. One of the things that we heard from the abutting neighbor is concerns around privacy. In some of the elevation views that you've seen, they are proposing a egress window, a single egress window on the northeast corner of the building, and a high transom window as well. They are providing a 6-foot by 6-foot screen wall in front of that window to help with privacy concerns. As you move sort of clockwise around the site, and this is in the backyard, you can see I've highlighted here in green the shrub bed that they are proposing. This is a layered shrub bed that will provide year-round screening for the adjacent neighbor's yard. As you move further clockwise to this would be to the southwest, 3 ornamental grasses in front of a bay window, an existing bay window to help with privacy concerns in the neighboring yard. And just highlighting the last thing I'll mention, or the last 2 things I'll mention, as part of scaling back some of the interior rooms that were on the north side of the building, they are proposing to enclose covered patio on the backside of the site, and you'll see those in your packet on the rear elevations of the building. And then the other thing I highlight is the garage spaces that will be retained and the proposed parking configuration within the driveway, and the parking that they're proposing to manage in the adjacent street frontage as part of the parking app. Next slide, please. This is a picture that just highlights the changes that will be noticeable from the street. So the relocation of front window, a single front window, moving it in the facade plane, and then a replacement of the front door. There's a side transom window for that front door. That's being eliminated with their newly proposed front door. Next slide, please. In the staff report, I just want to provide a point of clarification in the architectural section of the staff report. Some leftover information that indicated there would be 4 windows on the north facade. was incorrectly stated, and there will just be the two windows that are depicted in the elevation view on this slide. Next slide. These are detail images of the bicycle parking that will be required on site. The site lighting that they're proposing to change, these are all wall packs that would replace existing lighting on the building. And then the security gate for that central courtyard on the bottom left of the screen, and then that 6 foot by 6 foot screen wall that would be in front of the window. Next slide. So these conditions will look a little bit somewhat familiar to you. They were similar conditions that what staff was recommending in the previous project that you heard back in March. One of the major, next slide please. One of the major next slide after this, sorry. One of the major concerns that the neighborhood has been, that we've heard from the neighborhood, is concerns around the increased amount of traffic. So if you look in your packet in the traffic study, the increase will be for a single family home was estimated at 10 daily trips, and the proposed increase would be 14 daily trips to total of 24 daily trips for the expansion of this use to a 10 resident group home. So one of to highlight through the analysis of the traffic study and the operational plan, staff is recommending this condition to reduce the potential impacts to on-street parking, noise, and other types of disturbances that have been described as from the neighborhood. And the condition is, to the extent reasonably feasible, that the hours of operation during which third-party services such as massages, housekeeping, haircuts, pet therapy, and the like shall be limited to the hours of 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday, and staggered in a way to reduce the impact for on-street parking within the neighborhood. To the extent feasible, the deliveries and short-term visits shall be limited to available space within the driveway and the street frontage that shares a common boundary with the property. And in Stephanie's presentation, she sort of went over some new information that we didn't see before, that the project would be able to limit deliveries and operations beyond what we're recommending as part of this condition. So in some sense, this condition may be moot. The second condition that we're recommending is that the property owner just cooperate in good faith to remedy any unforeseen impacts created through the operation of the group home. Much of the communication, staff has acted as sort of an intermediary between much of the communication between the neighborhood and the applicants. In this condition is really just an effort to keep an open dialogue and keep a 24/7 point of contact for the neighborhood should issues arise, unforeseen issues arise that we can't control as part of the land use code, or we just don't foresee at this time. In conclusion, the project development plan, staff finds that the project development plan complies with the applicable procedural and administrative requirements in Article 2, that the project development plan conditionally complies with Article 3, and then the project development plan complies with all relevant standards in Article 4. And staff is recommending conditional approval of the Castle Ridge Group Home. And that concludes our analysis. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that analysis, Kai. I'm going to open it up to the commission for clarifying questions to either the applicant or staff.
Yeah, I just want to be sure I understand what it means when it was stated that the homeowners association has approved the occupancy level. Is there any more color to that?
Sure, the HOA saw the reasonable accommodation and that they agreed that they would approve the 10 residents for the reasonable accommodation request.
So, a question on the parking app. how can you control on-street parking with an app when you have no control of who's going to park on street or in front of what property and everything else?
Yep, the parking app specifically would be for the off-street spaces.
Can you, I'm sorry, restate the question so I don't.
Sure. Do you mind stating your name for the record?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Eric Schenk.
Thank you. So my question is, how is a parking app going to control on-street parking conditions when you can't control who parks on the street? Because a neighbor across the way could have another party, and the 3 spots that are in front of your property could be taken. How would you know if those are taken or not taken?
I would know if they are taken or not taken within the context of who is visiting our property. So, no, I could not control the on-street parking for other members of the neighborhood. That being said, the number of cars that are there, the peak number of cars there at any one time, assuming a normal day, is somewhere in the 5 to 7 range at most. So that should be, we should be able to mitigate it with the parking app in that way, since we have 6 slots available on site.
So if the neighbor across the way is having a party, like your picture
Right.
showed, and the 7th car came, where would they park?
Assuming that a party is a fairly infrequent event, they would have to do street park. I mean, they would have to park elsewhere on the street, along the street. But there's not a party going on every day either.
No, I understand, but that
So-
potentially could. Then I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
how you can control, how can an app help you control your available parking spots that you're proposing
Well,
for the need?
The app will let us know ahead of time who's coming and when.
Well, for your property,
Right.
but it doesn't control for any other one in the community that may be coming down your street and parking in front of your home.
Correct.
So let's hypothetically say that you're having some sort of an event at your property and need all 9 spots, but someone else in the neighborhood is parking in front of your property. That's dispersing other parking spots throughout the neighborhood or impacting the neighborhood more because the app doesn't know that there's an event happening across the way or whoever is parking. So I'm just trying to understand how this app is truly going to help the argument for the help of mitigating parking when I'm having a hard time justifying and understanding how this app is going to truly help.
And I'll just add a couple more things to that is that the app will first obviously assign people to the off-street parking spaces, with the on-street parking spaces being last. And exactly like you mentioned, like if someone is having a party and they're parking in front of our residence, what's to say that we can't park 10 feet more down the street? So those 3 spaces, are they painted on the street? Absolutely not. This is a public street. Any resident of this entire city is allowed to park wherever they want on this street. So if the spaces are taken up by our neighbors needing the spaces in front of our property, then yes, if we have someone else show up, then if someone else is parked in front of our house, we could park in front of theirs, because it is all public parking.
How do you plan to encourage family and friends to use the app?
We can write it into the lease.
Okay, thank you.
And we have tested that with the current resident, and they signed it without a problem. They agreed to use the app. So that is in practice.
So the app is for guests and employees, is that right?
The employees will have the garage spaces, and so if
So they won't use the app at all.
it'll be like those spaces are taken, they will still have to use the app. They will still say, I'm parking in the left spot in the garage. I'm parking in the right spot in the garage. So the employees will still be using the app as well,
And guests,
and guests.
Also.
Yes,
people, family, friends, and stuff that are visiting someone
correct.
that is housed in your facility.
Correct, and that's how it's written in the current lease. That say, hey, if you want your relative to live here, we understand that we understand that parking is an issue in this neighborhood, and we don't want to contribute to an increase of that. And therefore, if you would like to visit your relative in our home, please use this app. And the people, I said, absolutely, we'll use that, and they signed it, no problem.
So then for deliveries and service vehicles, somebody repairing a furnace or unclogging a toilet, whatever, they have to use an app also?
Correct.
Do you think you can find a service contractor to do that?
It-
Okay, yeah.
It's a quick download onto your phone.
Yeah.
And if they park in the driveway and they come inside for that service, we'll be like, hey, can you move to this space and we'll reserve it for you? Are you parked on the street? Please pull into the driveway.
And then doctors, how do you regulate that? I mean, they probably don't have a lot of time to reschedule to meet your requirements.
All of our service industry staff has agreed that the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday between those certain hours is acceptable for them.
So how does that make it better parking if it's Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever?
It's off-peak hours.
Okay.
So we understand that there are certain peak hours of trips, certain peak hours of parking. And so if someone is having a dinner party, rather than having our nurses come at 5:30 p.m., if they come at 2, then they won't be interfering with someone else who needs that on-street parking.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commission members? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. At this time, we're going to open it up for public comment. A couple of things. First, thank you all who showed up tonight. It is a late night already. Appreciate your patience. Thank you for coming out. Kai brought this up about the reasonable accommodation. This was approved by the director of CNDS, and because the reasonable accommodation decision cannot be altered by this commission, discussion of the reasonable accommodation is not relevant to the commission's decision, and that we ask that it is avoided. I just wanted to remind everybody that. Now, I understand, or I believe there's going to be some pooling of time. Who in the audience wishes to speak this evening? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, remember you can't pull time and speak. So, is anyone here dedicating time to anybody else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What's it? Yeah, I think so. So perfect. So, all right. Who is accepting the 7 people's dedicated time? Okay.
There's more than 7 people.
Okay. Well, there's 7 people here. So.
There's more than 7 people that have donated time and it's been approved.
No. I approve it. So. Okay, so there's 7 people here dedicating time. Okay, who's taking how many? How many are you taking? You're taking all 7?
No.
Okay.
No, we're doing this correctly.
Can we please go to the microphone so this,
Sir.
sir, can
Go-
you please go to
no,
the
no, hold
microphone so we can, this needs to get on record.
Yeah, you're right. So,
I'm sorry, my name is Dr. Steve Sunderman. I live 3 doors down from the proposed residence. We were told in email, and Kai can verify this for us, that those that wanted to donate time could donate time, and we sent that in and it was approved via email. Kai, it'd be very helpful if you would actually verify that for me. And then when we came in this evening, we were told, oh, no, we're not going to let you do that. I've been silenced multiple times throughout the hearings here trying to get my point across. And I really would appreciate an opportunity to get my point across this time. Thank you.
Thank you. You will
I have
Excuse me?
18 minutes, which I don't plan to use all of, but I do have 18 minutes promised to me.
Okay, so 6 of the 7 people are donating to you.
No,
You might want to
No.
explain the city
So,
council.
there was a
I have
ordinance. Excuse me. Stop.
donated. I have minutes donated from Brandon Hess,
Sir,
Vanessa
sir,
Hess.
they're not here. So we were allowing remote participation. That ordinance expired a couple months ago. So to participate, you need to be here in person as of today. So how many people, it's 3 minutes, are you accepting? You have 7.
I have Brandon Hess,
Where's Brandon Hess?
Vanessa Hess,
Where's Brandon Hess?
Joshua Sunderman,
Not here, not here.
Brad Sisson, Barbara Shireen, and Sandy Richards.
Mr.
And I have
Mr.
email
Sunderman?
verification that
Sir?
I can have minutes for each one of them.
Mr. Sutterman, you were given an opportunity to speak. Everyone in the public was given an opportunity to speak that came down today. If there's people in this room that would like to dedicate their time, you absolutely, I'm giving those to you.
Kai, could you help?
No,
please?
no more.
I am looking for previous communication from M, who is our development review liaison, to confirm.
I'm making the call. Okay, I'm making the
Changing
call.
the rules last second.
So I'm not changing the rules last second. So if you'd like to speak, please come up. Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely.
So can we get clarification between?
Yeah, I need clarification of who's donating time to Mr. Sutterman. So, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 5. So 5. Good. You have 18?
I believe I can get done in about 10 minutes here.
Perfect, sir. You may say your name and the address again, and then you'll have 18 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Dr. Steve Sunderman. I live at 607 Castle Ridge Court, just 3 doors down from the home on this proposal. I'd like to thank you for your time and dedication related to your previous review of the initial group home application. We as residents in the neighborhood are most appreciative of your prior efforts to evaluate the merits of this proposal and of your decision to decline the approval, which was unanimously declined at the initial proposal. The applicants are now coming forward with a new proposal, which is nothing more than the very same proposal with only a minimal reduction of residents. This would lead to the same devastating results to our community that the original proposal would have had. The reasons for you to reject this second proposal are numerous. I will highlight only a few, any one of which should be solid reason to reject this proposal. First, truthfulness and honesty in the application. The applicants began their application process by stating that they surveyed the neighbors, explained their proposals, and found no resistance from the surrounding neighbors. This is absolutely untrue. I have communicated with nearly everyone in our neighborhood, and without exception, not one person has told me they ever supported this proposal. Objections from our neighbors have been universal. The applicants have repeatedly asserted to city planners that they want to be good neighbors in this community. Their actions, however, tell an entirely different story. They have repeatedly presented false expectations about traffic, parking, visitation, change in residential appearance, noise, and safety. A short video clip of the real street in action has been provided for showing tonight. It shows the high traffic expected by this proposal would not fit on this narrow street. Would you please run the video? Stephanie has said tonight that there's plenty of room for two-way traffic to go with cars parked on both sides. This video shows that's absolutely not true. Stephanie has said tonight that she has invited all of us to come over and have a conversation with them. I have never been invited. In fact, I've asked multiple times to have an opportunity to discuss with them, and I've been declined. Kai can verify that, and he has written email and communication that verifies that. After being questioned multiple times, the applicants have finally admitted in the most recent recorded session that their long-range plan, after setting up this high-density commercial business in the middle of our well-planned low-density residential neighborhood, is to actually move out themselves and let this house just function as a business for their profit. Even the applicants have admitted that they would not want to live in or by this commercial use that they are proposing. Stephanie has confirmed that for you tonight, that they intend to move out. They wouldn't like it. Reasonableness. The neighborhood was carefully planned as a low-density residential neighborhood for single-family dwellings only. Part of the agreement from the original developer, Gary Nordic, was to also provide high-density homes in nearby areas, which he did to the letter as per his prior agreements with city planners. The street in front of this house is a private street, which is significantly narrower than the conventional streets. It was planned and authorized as such with the understanding and agreement by city planners and the developer that traffic and parking would remain very minimal due to the design of single-family dwellings only, and that there would be 3 or 4 car garages required for each home. It was agreed from the beginning, and it's written in the covenants, that there will be no high-traffic businesses allowed whatsoever. Off-street parking is severely limited on this narrow private road. It cannot accommodate the massive increase that would be required if this proposal should be approved. Next is misrepresentation. The applicants have intentionally misrepresented their credentials, and in particular, their portrayal of Eric Schenk as a physician. We have discovered, and Eric Schenk has finally admitted in recorded session, that he no longer has a medical practice. And in fact, he no longer even has a license to practice medicine. We've asked, and he has refused to give details of the loss of his license or of his medical practice. Nevertheless, multiple physicians in the area have told me that he was ousted by his own peers many years ago. It must have been bad. Further, Eric Schenk was openly admitted in recorded session, and Stephanie has admitted again here tonight that Eric and his wife are currently housing at least 2 at-risk individuals in what we understand is a lockdown situation without a license. He's refused to answer questions as to the legalities of this. A formal inquiry request has been filed with the Division of Regulatory Agencies. The investigation is still in process, and this must be resolved before any approval can even be considered. We're very concerned about an illegal operation. Misapplication of the FHA. The applicants are wrongfully trying to apply rules of the FHA to this project. The Fair Housing Act has strict limitations. Any application under FHA rules is required to be a reasonable application. This proposal in this neighborhood is not reasonable. It must fit the neighborhood. This large business does not fit the neighborhood. It must be safe for the neighborhood. This high-traffic business, and as you could see from that video clip, would be very unsafe for our children. Any accommodations made must be reasonable accommodations. The accommodations that they're asking for would require this for this project are everything but reasonable. Any application of this rule must not take away substantial value from one group of individuals while it gives substantial value to another. This application does just the opposite, with consequences estimated to be well into the millions of dollars. I'll elaborate later. It must be necessary for a clearly defined protected class. This proposal is not necessary for these applicants. Further, the owners of 636 Castle Ridge Court do not even belong to a protected class. They are both able-bodied and in no way disabled or protected. What they're doing is they're wrongfully flying the banner of a protected class that they don't even belong to. The goal of these owners is to gather together in the near future a group of memory-impaired individuals, it doesn't exist yet, claim that they, as owners of this business, are part of that disabled body, and then use these individuals for personal profit, all at tremendous damage to our neighborhood and at tremendous expense to all of the surrounding neighbors. It does not get any more wrong than somebody intentionally using an at-risk individual for one's own personal enrichment. Current city codes, HOA covenants, and the requirements of the FHA all require that ongoing development fit the community. This proposal in no way fits. These covenants, as well as fire and safety codes, are in place for a reason. This proposal violates all. Harm to the neighborhood. Trying to sardine 10 Alzheimer's individuals onto one floor of a single-family home, along with nursing staff, aides, pharmacy, PT, OT, cooking services, cleaning services, laundry services, plus 10 families of regular visitors would clearly be a disservice to the at-risk residents who would be forcefully packed into very small rooms into this home. It would destroy the beauty of the neighborhood. Recoverable financial damages to the residents of Castle Ridge alone could conservatively be estimated to be into the millions of dollars if this proposal should be allowed to go through. We, as affected neighbors, will plan to use every legal avenue available to protect our homes and our community from anyone who would wrongfully try to enrich himself in this way. Our documentation for legal purposes, if that is needed, is very solid. City staff has made it clear from the outset that they are determined to push forward this proposal. They have repeatedly failed to follow due process. They have accepted clearly deceptive and inaccurate statements from the applicants, even after the inaccuracies have been clearly pointed out to them. And again, a couple of those inaccuracies were presented to you tonight. They have bypassed the required rules of notice and meetings. City staff has silenced those of us who hold valid objections by actively censoring some of us at prior meetings. I've been censored several times because they know that my comments would have some effect. This is verified by email chains that I have sent in to you for your prior review for this meeting. I believe you've all had a chance to read those email chains that verify exactly what Kai has done. City staff has repeatedly promised opportunities for us to have open and honest communication with them and with the applicants, and then they have repeatedly reneged on these promises. This too is verified in those same email chains. Duty. In the prior review by the P&Z Commission, this commission upheld its duty to the community by rejecting what was clearly a plan by these applicants to wrongfully fly the banner of a protected class and to actually use that protected class for their own enrichment. We give you our most sincere thanks for upholding that duty to protect our community. The fire marshal at the very beginning of this process correctly asserted that approving this large business on this lot and on this narrow private street, along with its reasonably expected parking and traffic congestion, did not comply with even the most basic of fire codes. Then, after threats from their attorney, the fire marshal and the city both decided to simply ignore the clear safety and fire code requirements. This was an illegal political move. It must be corrected. Some members of city staff have tried to push this project through without due process. Sadly, the massive harm would be borne by our neighborhood, not theirs. My own home has been reappraised since the proposal for this group home has come up. As it was done prior to formal approval or disapproval, it was decided the value would have to have a large conditional delta in its value. I was given a tentative value if there were no group home there, and then a large tentative delta. We've taken that to court. All parties have finally agreed to devalue my home by $130,000 for court purposes just due to this pending proposal. My home is just 1 out of 18 on this street. We're talking well over $2 million just to our street, from decreased attractiveness to somebody that might want to come and buy. To the P&Z Commission, my most sincere thanks to you in advance for exercising rational judgment, for protecting our community, and for upholding your duty to our neighborhood. Please do continue to uphold your duty and reject this proposal in its entirety. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hold on. Yep, I'm just doing this math. So those 12 minutes, you obviously had your three, so I only dock you three people, so if anyone else wants to pull time. So would you come up next? So. Yep. Hold on, just. So there was 5, 8. There's five left, 15, so 18.
That'll work.
Okay.
So let me. You could just give me a second before you start the clock. I believe I shared my screen and everything's good to go.
You're trying to share your screen?
I thought I did. I did the little.
Have you upgraded him?
Are you logged into through the Zoom link for that? Or, oh, okay. You are promoted. Yeah, you should be able to press share screen from within Zoom.
Oh, I see. Control. Share. There we go. I think I.
For 18
Yep.
minutes.
Thank you. Got it.
Operator error. Sorry for the.
Nope, that's all right. And then just remember, state your name and address for the record and get started.
Okay. My name is Kurt Johnson. I live at 612 Castle Ridge Court, which is two doors down from the proposed property. So this is a group effort on the presentation. I'll be speaking for a number of the neighbors in the neighborhood. I'm just going to go quickly over some previous parking conclusions, the review of the current constraints, a comparison with another group home of Seneca House, which I think would be quite illuminating, a summary, and then a recommended approach perhaps for your consideration. So previous parking conclusions, the visitors and contractors will park on the street. The driveway is not inviting or obvious. When cars are parked on both sides of the street, it becomes one lane. We established that at the last meeting. And that really is not that controversial. Sidewalks blended to the curb, driveways are not obvious. And we have, as mentioned here, a narrow street where a variance was originally given predicated on 3-car garages. So this is just a quick review. This back in March, we presented this as well. You can see that it's restrictive, but then you have this little bottleneck here right in front of the property, which is where this is going to more likely occur. And what seems to be lost a lot of times in this whole debate here is that there are 17 other residents that have their own parking. It's not just parties. And people sometimes remodel, people sometimes have people park in front of their house to go visit. And the likelihood that cars are going to be parked on both sides of the street are much greater due to this, because you're almost always going to have on one side now, which rather than just the law of averages and if you do the math and the statistics associated with it. So there is definitely a big impact where the concern being that cars are going to be parked on both sides of the street as more of a general rule than an occasional situation as it is today. So current constraints, the street width is unchanged. The driveway layout is unchanged. It's not obvious. You can see the picture there. That's kind of, if you drive up, it's thin, it's long. Requires musical cars to achieve the stated capacity, because if you're in the garage, you got to get the car back out. How do you get in? How do you get out? Who's going to be there when that's all occurring? And so human nature is at work here. I mean, yes, there's been some proposals for mitigation and so forth, but let's understand also that people are people, and they're going to eventually, over time, even if everything's all gung-ho in the beginning and everybody's all trying their best, what's going to be the situation a couple of years from now? So let's do a comparison here to Seneca House, which is another group home. There was some comparisons to some group homes. I like to make it to this one. Seneca House was recently approved for 10 residents. It operated at 8 residents for several years. It demonstrated compatibility, but what is really key here is for the 10 residents is they have key built-in advantages related to parking that do not exist at Castle Ridge. Let's first start with the driveway. Castle Ridge on the left, single entrance and exit, narrow, hard to, you drive up, you're not going to necessarily think that there's going to be 5 cars parking in the driveway if you could fit that many. Seneca, however, has a circular layout. It's obvious to visitors and contractors. It provides much better circulation and more space. Then on the street, Castle Ridge, of course, as we've belabored quite a bit, is a narrow private street, constrained already, not designed for parking on both sides, whereas Seneca Street is a city secondary street. It's designed to support on-street parking on both sides. And Seneca House also has no neighbors to the west, meaning people are parking over there, not in front of anybody. So, as you can see then, you have if you're going to consider a proposal that supercharges the number of residents over code, this has distinct advantages that you can have a worthwhile conversation about that, as opposed to Castle Ridge, which has significant disadvantages associated with having a supercharged intensity of impact. And in your email packet from the last P&Z meeting in March, there was a quote from Seneca House, which is relevant here, which they say, sometimes we run out of on-site parking, but we have so much on-street parking that is never an issue. We are in a unique, emphasis on unique, situation because there is a middle school across the street and our northern neighbor's house faces Craig Street, on top of being on a secondary street with a parking lane and a wider street. So here, okay, perhaps you go above code. I mean, perhaps there's more possibilities there, but that does not exist in ours. So in summary, the applicants have never run an operation like this before. The applicant's estimate of 2 staff can handle full-time care of residents while managing operations is simply not realistic. Keep in mind the RA limits to 2 staff, so it's not like they can pop in another full-time staff. They could probably get around it perhaps by having several part-timers or something, and then they would still meet the RA, but you could see where this goes. The parking app, interesting gimmick. Is it practical? Is it likely to last over time? Because once this is approved forever. I mean, this goes on ad infinitum. And all of the attempted mitigations and operations have to be lasting, and they have to be, it's not just we're going to go do this, we get approval 3 months, 6 months, and then it just kind of disintegrates and evolves over time. Too late. We're left holding the bag. And finally, the operational plan is optimistic and dubious. It's not based on experience. With all due respect to the applicants, they have not run an operation like this before. And so where is this operational plan coming from, and what are the real impact associated? So in summary, bottom line, it's far too risky to approve 10 residents above code without hard data. We're throwing, so there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of rosy scenario that's being given. Really, would like you to consider that to go above code, to go above 10, we need a lot more hard data to go do that. And what is obvious during this whole process for the last year and a half is the applicants just did not consider, probably due to inexperience, the environmental factors. They looked at the house layout, they could see how many people they can fit in there. This is going to be great. But the parking, the impact of the neighborhood, they jumped in, they didn't consider the entire picture, and here we are. And then finally, Seneca only increasing to 10 residents after operating for several years. So continuing on, operational plan is mostly the same. Constraints are exactly the same at the last denial. The same issues of public health and safety exist with the current application. And simply put, a group home at more than the allowed intensity at this location jeopardizes neighborhood health and safety. So There is an approach here, though. I mean, so first would be to deny the initial application for 10 residents and perhaps follow the Seneca approach. Gain experience for several years first within code. Learn how to operate it. Let's get the hard data done, and let's look at what the impact is and figure out what the level of intensity really should be at the end of the day here. And then if it is appropriate, and if it looks like it's possible, a subsequent type 2 review to assess that feasibility for an increase based on operational success, demonstrated compatibility. And we talk a lot about what's going to happen and all these rosy type of things going to happen. Onus should be on proving it at a level that is within code. So finally, last slide, additional conditions for you to consider independent of intensity. This is not a solution for 10 residents, but just as in the back of your minds is something to think about. One would be no bus or van parking on site or on Castle Ridge. This was agreed to at the neighborhood meeting, but was not one of the conditions that staff recommended. Second, there's all this talk about staggering and getting deliveries, and all this is going to be all work out for the best. Perhaps a condition when you get a proposal within code that deliveries and short-term visits would exclusively use the driveway, and force and have some teeth that actually enforces the proposed staggering, as opposed to what will almost invariably happen, which is a de-evolution, and the applicants will move out. There'll be 2 staff there. The whole management of this has to be the 2 staff are going to take care of the residents. That's what they're there for. They're not going to worry about parking's going to be last, only if they have time, or managing all the ins and outs and all of that. And so we need something that manages that it kind of as itself, and that's not existing in this proposal as is. Finally, I just did want to mention on the HOA that is kind of a presented as an endorsement. It was not. The HOA did not endorse the project. They were essentially pressured by the applicant's lawyer to approve it. They had taken the position prior that we'll wait for the city process to come through, and then we'll go with whatever the city goes. We have to in the end. So just don't confuse that statement with that the HOA is behind the project. That's not necessarily the case. And another point, just in rebuttal, since I have another minute here, on the deliveries, which they were proposing a more aggressive delivery schedule, perhaps than what Kai had proposed as city staff. Well, when a in-code proposal comes up, make that a condition. I mean, rather than just say you're going to do it and then don't do it later and there's no recourse. And then finally, this idea that the HOA can enforce parking is a bit dubious. First, there is a nuisance clause in the covenants. That's true. However, nuisance is not defined. What is a nuisance? How is the HOA going to go in and come up with the parking rules? And that's just not necessarily realistic. So you can't look to the HOA to solve this. So that's the conclusion. Again, it's about deny the initial application for 10. Let's gain experience. Let's gather hard data, and then arrive at the optimal point, as opposed to jumping in all at once, go above, and then we can't go back. And that's it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Kurt. So I believe that there's 5 more people that wish to speak. If you could, maybe 3 line up in the middle, 2 on the end. And we'll start in the middle. State your name, address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Mike Liuzzi, resident 5225 Castle Ridge Place. Thank you for staying so late. Just a couple of comments on some of the things I've been hearing. Number one, the applicants state that their whole purpose here is to provide residential living for the residents that they want to have in that home. I think all of us have gone on vacations with family or friends. 10 unrelated people packed into a single family home is not residential living. They will be in small cells and maybe with occasional opportunities to go outside. This is not being done out of the goodness of somebody's heart. This is for financial gain. And then to reiterate some of the other things we've heard from our own HOA, the reason they agreed to this proposal is because they were threatened with legal action and monetary punishment if they go to court against this. It was not, they looked at a proposal and they thought it made sense and they agreed to it. It was done out of fear of reprisal. And then the last thing I want to reiterate is this is a small private street. When it snows, even for those of us who have snow-worthy vehicles, getting it in and out of this neighborhood is extremely difficult, not only on the few days after the snowfall, but the days after that when it's melted and become ice. This is not an easy street to get in and out of during the weather. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us.
Thank you, Mike. Over here, please.
My name is Barbara Zerstedt, and I actually don't live in their neighborhood. I live on Boardwalk Drive, which is right across the street. And I'm not going to reiterate what everybody else said, but one thing that occurred to me, this is a zoned residential neighborhood. Nobody's making a profit, but they are proposing to put in a profit-making business. And this is opening the door to a lot of unintended consequences. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Barbara. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my name's Steve Rhodes. I live on 5000 Boardwalk, and I'd just like to voice my objection to this whole plan as well. These people are putting in a long-term care facility. It's there for patients that are in decline. It's not a group home to help people integrate into the community. They're going to be kept within the facility and within the area. So this is not a group home type setting. That being said, they're also going to, since the patients are in decline, there's 2 staff members to take care of 10 is also a rather unreasonable expectation when there's going to be 30 meals per day that need to be made. There's going to be housekeeping that needs to be done. There's going to be meds that need to be passed. You need a therapist to come through and visit, occupational, physical, just like the doctor said. There is a constant flow within these facilities of ancillary caregivers. So the idea that it's going to be limited to 2 people that could fit in one garage all day long is unreasonable. There's going to be shift changes. Shift changes happen at all hours of the day. Some of the care facilities I've worked in, we start at 5 a.m. Others we start at 6. So there's going to be traffic at odd hours. Are you going to rotate 12s or 8-hour shifts? Who's going to move the cars out of the garage so that people can move in? And then visitors are totally unpredictable, and no app is going to regulate where visitors go and when they show up to visit. So that being said, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. And again, I just don't think that this is a well thought out. If there is a need for this type of facility in our city, but this is not the right location for it. It doesn't have the access and the availability of other services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Dewing, 5206 Castle Ridge Place. And so, again, similar points. It's a private road that we had tried to give it back to the city, but it was too narrow. They said they couldn't get snow plows in and out. So you saw the footage of the cars on both sides. One truck can get through the middle on a good day, going slowly. And that having no snow removal is going to complicate that for sure. And then I submitted a picture. It wasn't Greg Lassard. That was me. There's a big white van. They are unlucky. Number one, they're unlucky that they have a fire hydrant right there in front of their place. And then there's a big white truck on the other side. I don't know if that was theirs or not, but it's the 2 sides. But can you imagine that truck trying to get into that driveway and then trying to back out of that driveway to come out again, like not really feasible. And then we saw the pictures with even they pointed out, boy, there's cars on both sides of the street. Look at this, and the other people do it, but you don't expect for there to be parties every day, because if there were, you would say, boy, that's not a great way to set up a neighborhood. In regard to enforcing the parking, also I thought that was a funny thing. That's one of their cars right in front of the fire hydrant, and so they're not doing that right now as far as enforcing neighborhood parking, and that's only with 2 residents. And then lastly, do you realize that they have a 4-car garage? There's four spots that they can totally use. But they don't want to because they want to get more people in there and have a bigger home. And so that's what so to me, that it's, again, they found a house, the people had made it accessible for a lady who needed the help, and in fact the neighbors gave them leeway to make the house bigger on both sides. But the other parts of the house, where it's located on the street, in the neighborhood, the next street is a school zone, it's not working out very well, I don't think, for that plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Aaron Ellis. I am an owner and operator of a residential assisted living home in the Fort Collins area. I also represent a Home for Life, which is a group of a collaboration of homes like this. Homes where individuals can be cared for in a residential assisted living environment have unfortunately been disparaged here tonight. This is an important resource in our community, and it's a part of what makes communities better. Our neighborhood, which is a high-end residential neighborhood in Fort Collins, is made better by having a residential assisted living home in the neighborhood. I do recognize that when the home was first established in our neighborhood, we're in the country club Nedra Acres area in North Fort Collins, and there was opposition to our home coming into the neighborhood originally, and most of it was not in our backyard. It was fear of the unknown. What is this really going to be like? And the reality, as you saw on the slides tonight, Monarch Greens is a wonderful example. In fact, we improved the property values in our neighborhood because we have a really significant income. Not that we're getting rich what we're doing, but we put a lot into curb appeal and how our home looks in the neighborhood and how we operate within the neighborhood as a whole. Within this collaboration, there's homes like Terry Lake Assisted Living along the high-end Terry Lake neighborhood of North Fort Collins. There's Turnberry Place along the Fort Collins Country Club. It backs up directly to the country club. These do not disparage property values. There's Live to Assist on West Prospect that has only continued to improve over time and improve that neighborhood. Seneca House, which was brought up here today, actually has far less on-site parking and works incredibly compatibly well with that neighborhood. Bright Assisted Living in the heart of Windsor, Colorado, is a complement to its community. So residential assisted living is important for all of our communities. It works well in residential neighborhoods, and I understand opposition to it, but I really encourage people to come learn the truth about residential assisted living before disparaging it. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. I think that's everyone that is either spoken or donated their time. So thank you to the public who came out today. At this time, would the applicant like to respond to any of the comments they have heard from the public?
Yes, thank you. So I took a few notes here, and hopefully I get the summary. So again, we didn't say we reached out to every single neighbor in the neighborhood. We reached out to those adjacent to us. And in fact, my clients have unfortunately had to get a cease and desist order because of some harassment. And so therefore, we didn't want to necessarily approach certain individuals. Like I said, Eric and Siomi, yes, they are able-bodied people. They are moving out of the home. However, there will be 24/7 access to a property manager to handle any potential issue that could possibly come up. So they are able-bodied people. We're not trying to sneak around any laws. These are disabled seniors who will be living here who have memory care issues. So while they are, and the 2 seniors that are currently living in the home are doing so completely legally. There is nothing illegal about any operation that's happening at all. Everything is completely above board. I wanted to address Mr. Johnson's comment. The parking app does have a map associated with it, so people will know, hey, here's the map, here's where I need to get into the driveway, here's where I need to park. We did offer a circular driveway layout that would have provided more parking off street. We showed that at the first neighborhood meeting. It was immediately rejected and a huge negative feedback from adding that circle driveway. So that's why we didn't add that. The staff ratios at other facilities such as Morningstar, the staff ratio is 1 to 12 in those larger facilities. We're offering a staff ratio of 1 to 5. So I think it's unfair to say that our care will be worse in this location when we have 1 staff person per 5 residents instead of per 12 residents. The code allows 8 residents. We're simply asking for 2 more at this point, and it appeared as if Mr. Johnson was saying one of the solutions could be we operate under code. So I would ask what is so substantially different versus 10 that he is potentially okay with, and the group of people that he represented are potentially okay with, to adding just 2 more, which then allows us to be financially stable and allow this project to happen. They brought up Seneca House. The reason why they had to go up to 10 residents is because they could not afford to run the home at 8. It was a financial move that they had to increase those 2 beds. In our perfect world, we wanted 16. Because we could have, at 16 beds, we could have provided 2 Medicaid beds, and we could have helped lower income individuals. Unfortunately, because of the feedback that we've gotten, in order to do 10 beds, we had to remove those 2 Medicaid beds, which in my mind is so unfortunate. We will not have a bus. There won't be a bus on this site. Let's see. Oh, and then we did send a message to our legal counsel asking if she ever threatened the HOA, and she said absolutely not. That would be incredibly unethical. That did not happen. So I'm not sure where that came from, but I'm deeply sorry if anyone felt like that was their arm being twisted. And then the fire hydrant, yes, this vehicle that is parked in front of the fire hydrant was coming to our home at the time. The curb in front of the fire hydrant as part of this application will now be striped. It will be the only striped fire hydrant in this entire subdivision, but we are going to stripe it so that no one can park in front of that fire hydrant. The truck across the street was not for our home. That was someone else in the neighborhood. Is there anything else? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Would staff like to address any of the comments?
Yeah, I can address a few comments. So there was an assertion by Mr. Sunderman that it is staff's goal to push this project through for approval. Staff is simply just processing the application as we would any other project development plan application, where we evaluate the application through staff rounds of review for compliance with applicable city codes, and we present our recommendation to the commission or whoever the decision maker is for that particular project. And ultimately, the decision is up to the decision maker, not staff. There was some conversation from Mr. Sunderman that staff was looking to bypass rules and notice requirements for neighborhood meetings. There was some issues, I think, originally when we did have our neighborhood meeting for this project in July, where the sign posting that was originally posted for the first submittal of the project was taken down for some lawn work that the applicant was doing at the time. We have since rectified that situation. The required 2-week mailed notice for neighborhood meetings went out in compliance with Article 2 of the Land Use Code. And further, the Land Use Code does require a sign to be posted for neighborhood meetings, but it doesn't clarify the timing of the sign posting. Generally, our practice is to get the sign out prior to the neighborhood meeting. And in this case, I think it was 3 days that we realized we received communication from the neighborhood that there wasn't a sign posted, and we were able to respond to that immediately and have the applicants establish it in the front yard. Parking app, there were some questions from Mr. Johnson around the parking app. What if it disintegrates? This is actually something that I think is familiar to the city in the sense that we have a parking app for our parking garages downtown. We've recently changed parking apps. The expectation of the project would be to provide a parking app. It doesn't necessarily need to be this app, but it needs to be something to manage that parking in a similar way that you would experience in a downtown parking garage, where you're assigning a zone, you're assigning a space, and being able to manage that actively through the application for essentially their clients. There was a comment from I didn't catch his name, but I believe they lived on 5000 Boardwalk, that with an assertion that this is a long-term care facility. This does qualify under the definition of a group home. We actually define what a long-term care facility is in Article 5 of the Land Use Code. It can be one of 4 different types of care, and I'll spare you reading them all off. But staff did evaluate the project and made a determination that it does qualify as a group home under Land Use Code definitions and standards. And that concludes staff's responses. I'd be happy to answer anything that maybe I missed.
There was one comment accusing staff of censoring the individual. Is that something you want to comment or decline to comment?
Yeah, so there was a lot of coordination on staff's end to try to set up a secondary meeting after the neighborhood meeting for some of the residents that didn't feel like they were heard at the neighborhood meeting. Staff tried to coordinate that meeting. I think in the end, it was just found to not that the applicant team found it to be not potentially beneficial to have that meeting or productive to have that meeting. So there was an effort to hold the meeting. It just didn't work out.
I would like to add to that, Mr. Chair. As staff, we host neighborhood meetings. They're not necessarily hosted by applicant teams. It's city staff and our neighborhood development liaison in particular who facilitates those meetings. And we always reserve the right to facilitate those meetings in a way that promotes respectful and productive dialogue. And any time that that's not occurring, we have the ability to either cut off the conversation that's happening or end the meeting if it's needed. So to keep our staff safe, to keep our community members safe, and to ensure productive conversation is happening in the community, that is how we facilitate our neighborhood meetings.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Did any other commissioners catch anything from public input that they don't feel was addressed by staff or the applicant? Okay. Are there any last clarifying questions for the applicant or staff before we get into deliberation? This will be the last opportunity to address the applicant. Silence. Go ahead, Adam.
Is it within our purview to ask about how trash is going to be handled at a group home?
I think it, to the extent that there's trash enclosures, then I think it's fair to ask a specific question. Like, is there going to be?
I guess let me take a step back. Is trash handled through the HOA, so everyone has the same? And does your HOA fee pay? Does your HOA fee, the $400 a year, cover your trash pickup, or whatever it is?
I am happy to answer that. The HOA does not cover everyone's trash. Everybody has individual. One neighbor has a dumpster. We will not have a dumpster. We will have 3 individual trash cans that will stay in the garage or in the courtyard out of sight. 1 recycle bin. Then we'll come to the curb just as normal as a residential house does on trash pickup day. And then just to clarify about the neighborhood meeting sign being down, we were resodding the front yard. So we took the sign down to resod and then we put the sign back up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Clarifying questions?
I do have one. So, the help in the facility, there's 2 nurses or nurse-like people. Is that correct? And then, is there any other people in there? Janitors, maintenance people, anything else
As far as like maintenance,
that are in the house?
there are only 2 staff members on site.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, this is our last opportunity to address the applicant. All right. Who would like to start deliberation? Is it
Well,
12:42?
I don't know if I want to start deliberation, but I do think really for the benefit of everyone here, it's really important to reiterate what our role is, and that is to assess compliance with the land use code, and that is the code that's been in existence for some time. And just to be really sure that everyone is clear, small group homes are permitted in low density residential zone areas. So that piece of it is permitted under the land use code. A reasonable accommodation request was given. Yes, planning and zoning did deny the first application, and if my memory serves, it was based on the off-street parking for 16 for the caregivers for 16 residents, and the expectation that care workers would walk, I don't know what it was, half a mile or whatever. So I think, it's really important that we remember that that is what we are assessing is compliance with the land use code, not do we believe the ratio to caregivers to staff is sufficient or those sorts of things. So I hope that's beneficial to the audience, just so you understand what our role is and what it is not.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I was thinking similar as we were hearing public comment. I heard a lot of comments as addressed towards the applicant and towards the operation. But really, it is our role to assess how this complies or does not comply with the land use code. So thank you so much, Commissioner Stackhouse.
I think, though, in the consideration of parking and that kind of impact, that we have to understand the operation. How many people are in there? What are they doing in there? I find it difficult to believe that 2 people are going to manage this entire operation when there's laundry to be done, beds to be made, meals to be prepared, cleanup of all of this, maintenance of mechanical systems and bathrooms and plumbing and all of that. It seems odd to me that 2 people would be the amount of people taking care of this whole operation. I just don't believe it's going to be that way.
Earlier this year, my mom was in one of these similar situations, so empathetic to this need in the community. 2 seems low on the surface, but I don't believe that it would be. I think 2 people, because they're not the plumbers, they're the caregivers, and we've been told that the ratio is much different in the larger facilities, and 2 people staying with these patients, I think feels, I don't know, 1 to 5 doesn't seem that atrocious to me, but maybe I'm off there.
Yeah, I don't know that either. It seems like that would be a lot of work for one person to deal with 5 people that need that kind of care. But the point is that if they're not taking care of making meals and doing that, where's that coming from, and where are they parking? And there's still more to it than I think has been presented to us here. And I guess ultimately the issue is it's not enforceable. So whatever conditions we put on this, these are operational restrictions, and there's no way to enforce that. We've seen that with a daycare not too terribly long ago. That operational conditions just don't work.
Yeah.
So it's one thing when you build something and you have to follow a certain plan. That's different. This it will be up for grabs in a matter of weeks. I don't see how you can get people delivering food or doing maintenance or any of that are going to use an app to do it. You're lucky to get people to come and do maintenance on your property. So this, it's a dream, in my opinion, that'll work smoothly and it won't impact the neighborhood. And then at any given time, you can have an emergency, a medical emergency, and then there's several vehicles that turn out for those. And the streets are so terribly narrow. It just simply seems like it's stretching the ability of that neighborhood to deal with this.
So I guess where I'm at is fully understand the need. I'm not questioning the ratio. I mean, that's not my expertise. I don't know. That's not part of our purview and everything else. My concern that I'm working through and wrestling with is the parking impact. The other properties that you've shown as examples are on the periphery of neighborhoods. This one's in the middle of the neighborhood. And so the in and out, the impact of the traffic in and out of the overall neighborhood, if it was on the periphery, I may have a different feeling. I'm not saying I can't get around it, but that's my struggle, is I do think with the narrow roads and streets in the neighborhood that there will be an impact. And I'm sorry, you can use whatever app you want. You can tell people to do whatever you want them to do. It's not going to happen. It's just, let's be honest about it. We can plan for the best thing, and it's just reality. I look at the impacts in my neighborhood with my neighbors and what's going on and everything else. So I'm empathetic to the congestion and potential concerns with that. I'm empathetic to the need, because there is a need for your operation. So I'm just struggling with how to balance this. And looking at the land use code, I'm looking at more of a compatibility with the parking and the concerns that are being raised, especially with the narrowness of the existing conditions out there. And that's what I'm struggling to work through, is that aspect, and trying to be talked off the fence one side or the other, to be honest.
Yeah, for me, it's the assumption that these are the numbers, and that's really how it's going to work, and the mitigation. It's simply not going to work. So I think the parking really is ultimately the problem here.
Can someone remind me how many off-street parking we had in the original proposal versus this one? I don't remember in the original. I know I'm going back to clarifying questions. I apologize for that.
Wasn't there 5? Because wasn't there 2 that were further away? So there was the 3 in front and then 2 that were.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Off street.
It is a similar amount. The only addition for this particular project would be the garage spaces.
So 2 more.
2 more.
Thank you.
So Jeff, contextually, it's really distilled down to the parking for compatibility.
That's where I'm at. Is
Okay.
And like I said, if this property was on the peripheral edge of the neighborhood, and it wasn't the impact of getting in and out of. I mean, this is in the heart of the neighborhood, and that's where I'm struggling with the location of it, with the potential impact that this would have. And it's not impacting 1 or 2 homes; it's impacting several homes as the trips go in and out of the neighborhood.
So, what standard specifically are you feeling that it may or may not?
Now you're going to make me think
Yeah,
at 1 in the morning.
it's 3.51J,
Yeah.
operation and physical compatibility. It's the same standard we talked about last time.
Correct.
Well, I'll admit I struggled. I was very concerned about parking the first time around. In fact, I think I made the motion. I think this is an improved proposal. There are 2 more off-street spaces, but the big change is the number of residents. So the number of potential visitors is substantially less than what we saw in the earlier proposal. I don't think 8 or 10 is going to make a difference here. I think it's really, Perry, your point, which is there's going to be deliveries and other things. Best effort to keep to these non-peak hours. I think that's great, but there are going to be deliveries and other things, and so the question then becomes, how do we apply the land use code when clearly small group homes are permitted? At what point do you say street width becomes a defining factor? I'm really struggling with that because I don't know for the next proposal then how you draw that line.
Well, it's just that 2 feet makes a big difference on trying to get 2 parking spots and then through traffic safely. Having the normal width of a traffic lane is 8 feet. With the proposed, we're going down to 14. So if you're trying to get 2 vehicles through, you're talking 7 feet. That's tight, even with smaller vehicles. It's definitely tight, and I can appreciate and understand the concern. How often is that going to happen? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean that's the real point.
Correct, but I can also say if I had a family member in this facility, I want to go see him. I'm going to go see him. If one of my parents were there and having issues, I don't. Respectfully, I'm not going to use an app. I'm going to go take care of and be part of a situation that they may be experiencing. And that's just the reality. So to control how many visitors are in and out, it's very difficult. And that's the struggle that I think I'm having personally is there's so many unknowns with this and potential impact. So I respect the challenge, but I also, and that's why I'm saying I'm on the fence because I can see both sides.
If this wasn't a private street and had a little more width, I think that it might work, and sort of ignore all of these operational restrictions because they aren't going to work in 6 months. It'll be gone. So I think we have to deal with this based on that very narrow street. It's really even too narrow of a street to be a residential neighborhood for people coming and going and parking on the street. If people were parking on driveways, that'd be a different thing. But people do park out in the street in this particular neighborhood. I mean, we see the pictures.
There's a lot there's a lot of unknown, and we can't solve for it. We can't control everything. To Julie's point, how do we use the land use code? But that's the only tool we really have. And if there's two staff, and then services, but visitors, I don't know if they're all coming at the same time. I don't know how often they'll have someone in the street.
No, but we do know that houses require maintenance and
Absolutely.
laundry and all of those things that those caregivers probably aren't doing.
Right. But do they all come at once? They might. They might
Maybe,
not.
yeah, maybe not.
So-
But it's an increase anyway.
Yeah.
There's street parking, no doubt.
They would need 4 of those additional people at the same time, in addition to the 2 staff, to fill up their 6 spots that are off street. Right? Because there's 6
That's
off
right.
street spots. So they would need 4. They would need a plumber, a laundry person, a medicine person. You know, I mean, we're getting into their operations of doing business, but to kind of ease your concern there, they've got 6 spots off street that would have to be full before you're putting someone out into
That's
the
so
street.
unlikely that there aren't those people along with the 2 caregivers. Not unlikely at all. Somebody's preparing the food. Somebody's cleaning up after the food. You know, it's all of those things. Somebody's doing the laundry.
I could be wrong, but I think when we talked about that at the last meeting, the care providers are doing the cooking and laundry.
There's only 2. They're giving care to 5 people, and then doing lunches, dinners, breakfasts, all of those, changing bedding, doing all of that kind of stuff. I think it's.
But keep in mind that they're not. It's memory care that they're helping with, so it's not that they're incompatible of doing stuff. They may be incompatible of remembering what they did yesterday, but it doesn't mean that they're incompatible of doing things on their own. And
But they
being
aren't preparing
self-sufficient.
meals. They aren't doing laundry.
You never know, and that's where getting into the operations, we can't make those assumptions. And it's not part of the land use code.
So we're starting to go down rabbit holes, as we are really good at doing. A lot of what ifs, a lot of unknowns, a lot of trying to over control everything, and really just trying to look at this through the lens of the land use code. Are they meeting it? You know, and then that's the question. And if there's one specific standard and it's that compatibility, then, does anyone have a strong decision, yes or no? Or is everybody on the fence?
I don't have a copy of the code like you probably do underneath your desk there. But 3.51J, is the wording contained in the staff memo, the complete wording from the code?
We could always pull it up on screen if that's helpful.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. If you can, that'd be great. My battery's about to die.
0.51J.
Well, I think the compatibility, the 3.5.1A and B was at least what Jeff was of question. So, are you still on the fence, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I'm struggling with how much of an impact, and is this going to be, and is it reasonable? Is the impact reasonable enough or not?
And you're struggling because we don't know.
Correct.
And
And
we
that's-
don't have crystal balls.
Correct, and that's
and there's speculation, some of which may be true.
correct, and it may not be an issue at all, which has been cited by other.
And I think we can
providers.
all agree that it will, the impact will ebb and flow
Correct.
throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year.
Well, just like when both my kids, well, my third one isn't able, but when my 2 older kids start driving, there's going to be a bigger impact to my neighborhood. And I mean, I fully respect that. So, but it is an impact,
Yeah.
that I will be creating and that I know that is going to happen.
Okay. 3.5, Julie, I know you're talking about J still. 3.5.1AB, the compatibility. Is every single person on the fence, or is one person feeling one way or the other? Adam, Julie.
Group homes are allowed. We are not here to talk about 10 versus 8. That's been talked about. And group homes are allowed. I think there's 6 parking places that aren't on the street that this home has room for, and I don't think it's going to be any more of an impact than someone with 3 kids that drive and have 2 parent vehicles and 3. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that incompatible with a 7,000 square foot house, 3 houses down.
Okay.
That's my.
Okay.
I would have a hard time saying it's incompatible.
Okay.
I'm leaning there, and I will tell you this has been a real personal struggle to get there. But as I read and reread the standard in the land use code, which talks about compatibility, but then when you get into this particular provision of the land use code, it specifically talks about the imposition or imposing conditions. And so it doesn't say, if we go to item 7 there, which is the location and the number of off-street parking spaces, it doesn't say you have to have so many off-street parking spaces. It's just saying you can impose that as a condition. I have to look back at where our concerns were before. It was just a larger group home. It's now a smaller group home, and I think there will be on-street parking, but I think there is in a lot of neighborhoods with narrow streets. And I guess my leaning this time is that it is permitted by the land use code, and that the parking considerations are substantially mitigated from our earlier decision.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Project compatibility.
I think I'm pretty clear that I think the parking impact is very great. When that street was built, there was no sense that there would be any sort of commercial use in that neighborhood. You know, if the street had been wider, I would have probably said, yeah, you know, that neighborhood could sustain that kind of parking and that kind of additional traffic. It can't.
Okay, so project is incompatible.
Yeah.
Mostly based on the street width.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Julie, you were talking about 3.51J, and I kind of want to get through that first. Do you want to circle back with staff on that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. We got a couple people leaning one way, a couple people on the fence. On the chair, I don't have to say where I'm at yet. Would anybody like to make a motion, one way or the other? Adam?
I want to make sure that if we don't believe that the condition, I don't want to put a condition or something that's not enforceable, because that doesn't make any sense, and it's not really within our purview to manage how they run their business, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong in that. So I can't come up with a use code or part of the code that to reference that says you have to do that app, right?
Yeah.
I would not base
That's what
anything
I'm saying.
on the
That's
app.
what I'm saying. Like, I can't.
I'm putting nothing in the app. Zero.
I think the 2 conditions staff recommended.
That's where it's at, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Kai, if this was only 8 people in the code, would it be a type 2 hearing?
It would be.
Okay, thank you.
It's a group home. Yeah.
So maybe this will help. If there was 8 people here instead of 10 residents, you're still having the services come. Like 8 to 10 doesn't have the increase is very negligible to me. 16 was a lot. That was not negligible. This to me is negligible. So the increase. So I guess with that said, I'll fall one way off the fence and I will support.
I'll make a motion then.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm not 100% sure. Do I want to read the conditions, or as they were presented? Is that an acceptable way to say it, or should I read them?
If you want to read them, there's 1 and there's 2.
Does it matter if do I need to read them or say as presented? Can I deliver the motion that way? Perfect.
What? Well,
Wants to know if he needs to read the specific conditions.
are you okay with all of the conditions?
Both of them.
I think. I'm sorry.
Both of them.
Okay. Yeah, I think with the prior item, there were 3 conditions and you wanted 2 of them, it was not clear. But if you're okay with all of the conditions and it's clear what you're okay with, then I think that's fine.
Okay.
To reference them as in the staff report.
Thanks, Brad. I move that the Fort Collins Planning and Zoning Commission approve the Castle Ridge Group Home Project Development Plan and Final Development Plan PDP 220013 with staff recommended conditions as stated in the staff report. This approval is only for a group home for memory care as described in the agenda materials and not for any other type of group home. The Commission finds in consideration of the conditions and approved reasonable accommodation that the project development plan and final development plan comply with all applicable land use code requirements. This decision is based upon the agenda materials, the information and materials presented during the work session, and this hearing and the Commission discussion on this item. Further, this Commission hereby adopts the information analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions regarding this project development plan and final development plan contained in the staff report included in the agenda materials for this hearing.
Thank you, Adam. Do you have a second?
Second.
Before we ask for a roll call, anybody have any final comments?
I do just want to say, first of all, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and everyone's still sitting here, so I greatly respect everyone being part of the conversation and being engaged. My decision tonight is not against the neighborhoods and it's not against the operators of what is in need. So I'm truly on the fence and I'm struggling with this one. So my decision will not be based on anything other than my interpretation of the land use code.
If I could also add, I really do appreciate everyone coming out as well. These are really hard. I know they're very emotional for the neighborhood, but they're really hard for us too. And unfortunately, the land use code, as it's currently stated, has a lot of really gray areas. And I know you're saying no, but we're the ones that have to make the interpretations, and that can be very difficult. I might add, for those that were interested in the accommodation request, a copy of those conditions. Kai, we forgot to put it up. It's on page 666 of the staff report for anyone interested in looking at that.
Thank you, Julie. So, these are really difficult. You know, the neighbors have rights. The neighborhoods have rights. The applicants have rights too, and we try to accommodate everybody. But that's almost always impossible to do. So, with that, can I have a roll call, please? And happy birthday, Shar. It's past midnight.
Thanks. All right, roll call. Stackhouse.
Yes.
Hogestad.
No.
Schneider.
Sorry, but no.
Sass.
Yes.
And Katz.
Yes. With that, the motion passes.